In the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how to scale a 7-figure SDR team. Now, I've built and fixed these teams across agencies, coaches, software companies, and the ones that scale to 7 figures always follow the same rules and principles, such as how the compensation is structured, how many setters per closers, etc., etc. And in the next half an hour here, I'm going to show you exactly how to structure the team, the exact numbers every single rep has to hit, how to pay them so that they push their limits, what they should actually say on the phone, and the handoff that decides your close rate on these SDR sets. If you've got a setter or two and you're trying to turn them into a real machine, this video is for you. Now, quick bit of grounding first, because people get a lot of this wrong from day one. A setter or an SDR, whatever you want to call them, they are the first human that talks to you specifically. Their job is to take intent that already exists and turn it into a qualified, committed call that your closer takes. That's it. They're not cold pitching strangers. That's a different job entirely. In a real funnel, the leads come in warm. It's from ads or outbound or referrals, whatever that looks like. And the setter's job is to protect the quality of every call your closer takes. Get people to show up and make sure only the right people get through. Now, here's a shift that separates the good teams from the bad teams. And most people run setting as a volume game. They just book as many calls as you can, or they throw them all at a good closer and hope some stick. And what you get off the back of that is a calendar full of junk and a closer who's just sick of taking shit calls. And of course, the good teams run this the other way around, right? It's not about how many calls you book, it's whether those calls are qualified and they close, right? A call that won't close is worse than an empty slot, because it costs your closer the one thing you can't buy back, which is their time and their energy. And so hold that frame the whole way through, and you're not building something that just like books more calls. You're building something that books better ones week after week without the numbers swinging all over the place. So let's get into it. How do you actually structure this thing? Industry standard is one setter per closer, one SDR feeding one closer's calendar. If you're starting out, just start there, but it's not a fixed law, right? It moves with your volume. So if you've got a lot of inbound, a lot of dials going out, one setter can't keep a closer full and do all the follow-up and recovery properly, so you get two setters per closer. How do you know which one you need? Simple, you look at the closer's calendar, right? Gaps in the calendar on a setter who is just flat out means, of course, you're short on setting, so you add a second person. Calendar is full, or half the calls are no quality or no showing. That's not a ratio problem, and adding more people just books more of the same. So you fix that standard, whatever the specific bottleneck is first. So the order is start 1-to-1, push that setter till the output maxes out with the quality still there, then add a second setter to that closer when the time comes. Now you've got a pod, which is one closer, one or two setters, one clean pipeline. That's what you scale. And so it's not just random hires or anything of that nature. You get one running properly and then you build the next. And so most people, what I see is they try to scale by hiring 3, 4, 5 setters and 3 closers into one big pile where nobody owns anything. And so pods, they keep it clean and then they give you the numbers that you actually need off the back of that as well, which is exactly where we're going next, because the pod's only worth what the people inside it produce. And so this is the part everybody wants and nobody enforces properly. And so activity first, right? A setter should be doing $150 a day at a minimum, right? That is their floor. And if that sounds like a lot to you, then that's usually the whole reason the team never scales whatsoever. The activity was never there, so the results were never coming off the back of that. And so the two ratios of those dials is your pickup rate, which is the dials that actually reach a human. Industry standard is at least 10%. And of the people who pick up, you want to book at least 1 in 5, and so 20%. Let me run that so it's not abstract. And so 150 dials, 10% pickup rate, that's 15 real conversations. Book 20% of those, that's 3 booked calls a day off one setter. And so if your setter is dialing properly and coming back with less than that, you know roughly where it's breaking, whether it be the dials, the connects, or the conversion on the actual calls themselves. They're all 3 different problems and they're all 3 different fixes. So identify which one it is and then move forward from there. Now, alongside this, which is very key, you don't just track overall how much your SDR team is doing specific numbers on your entirety of your SDR team. You track every setter on their own as well. So their specific show rate, right? How many calls of one specific setter actually shows up? What is their offer rate? How many get to a real pitch, right? What is the close rate on the specific setters on the calls that they set? and of course cash for book call, right? And the last one matters more than the rest put together, which is two setters can both book, 10 calls a week and they can look identical on a dashboard, but one's booking calls worth $2,000 each and the other's booking tire kickers worth 200. And so it's the same activity, nowhere near, of course, the same value. And alongside that, your cash per book call shows you that in about 10 seconds, right? Who's protecting the calendar and who's padding their booking count with a lot of shit. Another good one that you should track, another SDR metric, is your rebooking rate on no-shows and cancel calls. When you're small, a no-show is one last call, it's like whatever, right? But when you're running a few different pods and you've like 5, 10 SDRs, it is a real leak if you do not track that number and you don't do things to try and improve it. So how well you recover it is its own metric. And I'll talk more of that shortly. Number one thing here that ties it all together is a proper SEO team should be driving around half of your revenue, at least half. Now, these numbers only get hit if the person's actually motivated to hit them. So let's talk money. Compensation is a place where a lot of people either don't know how to structure it whatsoever, or they get it wrong and therefore their team isn't motivated. And so if you pay a setter a flat wage, you will get a flat effort. And if you pay them properly, you'll get them to actually push themselves without you needing to be on them every single day. So here's the exact structure that I would typically use, which is your commission is 5% of cash collected, not booked calls or revenue, it's cash collected, right? And that's important because it ties the setter to the actual outcome rather than a value number that they can game, such as booked calls, right? A setter paid per booked call will book you anything with a pulse, and a setter paid on cash collected has skin in whether that call was good and gets the outcome that we all want, which is cashed in the bag. Then is the accelerator, right? Past a certain cash collected threshold, that 5% jumps to 7 or 7.5%. And the whole game is where you set that threshold. So if you set it too low, it's just free money at the end of the day and they hit it without trying and it doesn't incentivize them whatsoever. And same thing, vice versa. If you set it too high and they write it off in a week or two or whatever it looks like, the timeline is too short, the incentive is dead completely. So you want it genuinely realistic, but of course properly demanding alongside that at the same time. And so a number that they have to stretch for and one that pulls them through the back half of the month when they'd otherwise be coasting. Once they can just ultimately see that threshold in reach, the last week or two of the month stops being a wind down and comes an extensive push. And alongside that, it costs you nothing you didn't want to pay because you only pay the higher rate on money that's actually landed in the bank. On top of that, what I recommend is run cash collected bonuses, right? So top cash collecting setter this week gets a bonus. Couple hundred quid, whatever that looks like, whatever is meaningful for them, whatever makes sense financially in your business. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, and that's completely fine because the money isn't the point. It creates a weekly scoreboard per se. It creates competition. It keeps the team's eye on cash collected rather than the activity and the activities for sake, right? The through line in all of it is pay on cash collected, not activity. And every incentive should push towards that outcome of cash collected, not the input. So you pay for dollars, you will get dollars, but if you pay for cash, you'll get some cash, right? They're structured, they're paid properly. What do they actually say on the phone? Now, this is the part that most guys skip, and it's where, the whole thing actually matters, or where you get the outcome that you want is if they're actually having quality conversations on the phone. There are a couple of situations that a setter is in, and, they're genuinely different jobs. And so someone who filled out a form but didn't schedule a call, someone who attended a webinar but didn't schedule a call, somebody who replied to a cold email but didn't schedule a call, whatever that looks like there, they showed intent but didn't schedule. There's someone who has scheduled but hasn't been spoken to yet, or what we call triaged as a setter. And then the third one is someone who has no show or canceled. I'll go through these one at a time. Situation one is, of course, they showed that initial intent. They showed up for something, raised their hand, and never scheduled a call. This is the biggest pool of wasted money in most businesses, which is someone raised their hand and nobody called them, or they didn't get a qualified conversation off the back of that. And speed matters more than anything else here, really. And so same error, ideally within 5 minutes, and every 5-10 minutes that goes by when somebody raises their hand, you are losing money, right? And so the open is simple. It's seeing you, raise your hand to whatever XYZ. Figured I'd give you a ring rather than just send you another email, whatever that looks like, right? It's meant to be human, it's not scripted. And if they're busy, don't hang up, pin down a better time. And the highest intent question you can ask is, what made you raise your hand for XYZ thing? What made you show it to the webinar? What made you reply to the email? Not, how can I help, right? From there, you bring them into their current situation, then their desired situation. And then a question a lot of people skip, and they shouldn't, is what made you look at bringing in someone rather than just carrying on as you were? Or what made you look for external help rather than just continuing to watch YouTube videos, for example? It makes them articulate that they need your specific help, which is a big reason as to why they would show up on a call. And if they verbalize that as a prospect, you are doing extensively well. Then priority, which is, of course, how fast are they looking to move or change the specific situation that they're in? And you want to get the prospect to verbalize that on your setting call, again, to make sure that they show up with intent. And then depending on your offer, you'll probably have to do some type of financial qualification. A lot of the time, what I typically do is I give them some type of range. I'll say, hey, this is a mid to high 4-figure investment, for example, or hey, this is like a low 5-figure investment. Would that be doable for you if everything made sense, or would that be completely out of range? Pretty simple. And the last thing that most people don't do is send your pre-call materials or stress the importance of watching them at the end of that call. You say, hey, I'm going to send you this specific link. And a lot of the time it's going to be your confirmation page or your thank you page. There's another video on that if you don't know what that is, or you want to learn how to structure it properly, or some type of specific content interview or YouTube video that speaks directly to that specific person. Now, situation 2 is they book themselves in and there has been no standard contact yet. These are your hottest leads ultimately, which is, they found you, they filled out some type of application, they submit their information, and then they put themselves on the calendar. And most businesses don't do anything in between that in terms of an SDR calling them. And so they miss out on that human to human connection between that call, which is massive. So every booked call that you get should get triaged by one of your setters, right? And typically these calls are going to take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. And it's the exact same purpose as the first one, which is you qualify, you find out the current situation, you set expectations, and you stress the importance of watching whatever pre-call materials you want to send over to them. And of course, situation 3 is that they either no-show or cancel. So I'll come to the recovery problem in a second, but the principle here is that this is not a rejection, right? They booked, the intent was real, and your job is to find out what actually changed and get them back on the calendar. The key thing here is bringing up why they scheduled the call in the first place, which will get the prospect to remember why they did that in the first place, which again is going to get them to show up in the first place again. With that in mind, even a perfect setting call will leak money if you don't have the next bit of this right, which is the handoff process, right? The moment the lead goes from the setter to a closer is one of the most underrated part of the whole machine. And it's where I see the most money left on the table, which is most teams treat it as not of importance. The setter books a call, they scribble a note, and a closer walks in with no specific context as to why that person is on their calendar. And so the closer burns the first 5 minutes asking relevant questions based on what the conversation was with the setter. The prospect has to repeat their whole story of what they said on that initial call, and that warm prospect turns from a bit of a iffy/cold prospect 5 minutes later, which is something that, of course, you don't want. And so here's how the 7-figure SDR teams do it. And so notes first, and in 2 specific places, which is your Slack channel and the CRM, right? Not nice guy, wants leads, whatever, some bullshit like that. You want who they are, what they want, their pain points, their decision process, what came up, and the closer reads that and walks in knowing more than the prospect expects. And that's what warm feels like from the other side. Now, the second one, and a lot of people don't do this, is the intro, right? The best setters don't book and disappear. They start some type of group chat. And again, this works best mainly with B2C, but they start some type of group chat with closer upon the prospect, and they personally introduce the closer. And it's not a flat like, here's David, he'll take it from here. It's some type of voice note, and the setter records an actual voice note, building closer up, plus something specific about that prospect. So it's obviously personal and it's not some type of template. And off the back of that, this prospect there really wants to show up because we're putting in that extra effort as an SDR to make sure that the closer has a lot of context, which is what prospects want. And I want you to think about what that does, right? The prospects build rapport with the setter. That trust is real. Well, normally it, of course, dies off at the handoff because a stranger takes over then off the back of that. That voice note or some type of long message carries that trust across to the next person. And by the time the closer gets on, they've already been vouched by someone the prospect likes, and you don't drop the warmth in that gap. You've moved it over to the next person. So it costs nothing, but it's a standard that you should hold your SDR team to do. And it lifts everything like your show rate, your offer rate, your close rate, etc., etc. Now, that no-show leak, right? When somebody no-shows, most teams write it off. They might get a few calls and that's it. They raise their hand. Their intent was real, and just writing them off and doing nothing about it or just giving them one call is just a wasted opportunity. So you want to systemize it, right? No-shows get contacted same day, 5 to 10 minutes after the missed slot, not tomorrow when they've gone cold. And the cancels as well, same day. The type of mindset that you go into when you speak to these people is you're not apologizing for chasing them, right? They booked this, you're following up on something they've asked for. Alongside that, it's no guilt tripping either. It's not, we had time out there for you, where were you, what were you doing? None of that shit, right? You just find out actually what changed. And usually it's one of three things, which is something genuinely came up, they are cooling off, or they've gone elsewhere, gone to a specific place, right? And so each needs a different response, and only one of them is worth rebooking. Important to know here again, do not send a link and hope. Either you rebook them live on the phone, same as the first time, and also make sure to get the handoff and the recovery right, and you close a lot more if the exact same leads. None of this holds unless someone's actually watching it week to week. So let's talk about how you actually run the SDR team. Metrics on a dashboard that nobody looks at is something that, of course, you don't want. So what turns these numbers that we're talking about into performance is some type of rhythm or cadence, and the tools to make that rhythm / cadence extremely possible and doable. And so the two main tools that you need, you don't need too much more than this for your SDR team, is close for dialing. Make sure you get the third plan, which allows them to paradial across a number of different people. Just goes bang, 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 bang to the next lead, makes them super efficient. So your setters live in close. It's the dialer, it's the CRM, it's where every call and every note sits. The reason this matters is beyond convenience, right? Every metric that I gave you earlier, which is dials, pickup rate, booking rate, individual setter stats, etc., a lot of it will come straight out of here. So if you're dialing and your CRM live in two different places, your numbers are a guess ultimately, and your call reviews are also a nightmare. And so have one system, everything's logged there, and there's nothing to reconcile whatsoever. Alongside this, using Slack for communication. So this is, of course, where the handoff lives, right? It's where the setter notes go in the channel. It's where the notifications come up for no-shows, canceled, new leads, whatever that looks like. So the setters are able to be super, super on the ball with the leads that are coming in. And it's also where the things like the wins go, where the scoreboard goes, and where the team actually feels like a team instead of a few people dialing in isolation. And so that's it, right? It's close and Slack for your SEO option. Anyone selling you a bigger stack than that at a size lower than 20 SDRs is selling you too much complexity, which is something that you don't want. Now, the rhythm on top of that is, I would honestly, if you have a pretty big SDR team, anything more than 3, I would do near a daily stand-up or team meeting. And on that, you're covering what they did yesterday, what's booked, what calls are on the calendar, do they need to communicate with specific closers about those specific leads, what's in the pipeline. And this can be, you know, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. It's not always just about the information and the things being said. It's you having that human connection again, because an SDR's job is a lot of the time not easy. They're sitting by themselves, dialing. They're not speaking to anyone from a closing perspective. It is trench work. And so if you're on a scheduled call with them live on a Zoom call every single day, it does help their excitement to really get after it every single day on the phone. Alongside this, I would recommend doing one-to-ones with your reps. And this is where, of course, your individual tracking pays for itself, because you can point out at the exact stage that something's broken or a certain KPI is off for that specific person and help them with that specific thing. Now, everything I've given you, of course, the numbers, the $150, the comp structure, the voice them handoffs, the pods, none of it holds without one thing underneath it. And this is really what separates a team ultimately that does the 7 figures from the ones that stay extremely small. which is ownership, right? In a team that doesn't scale, a no-show is a lead who flaked and who isn't interested. A dead deal that was once interested is bad lead quality or a bad lead. And a light calendar is, marketing is not sending us enough. And you don't want to hear these things. Everyone's got a reason for what's going wrong, but nobody's getting the outcome that you want. And in a team that scales, just like closers, the setter owns the outcomes that they are involved in, right? A no-show is not the prospect's fault. It's not the marketing's fault. It's a gap in the confirmation process or the skill level that that setter has on the actual conversations themselves. They need to take ownership for the outcomes that they're getting. So build a team around setters who actually want to take on that ownership. The setters who treat the closer's calendar like it's their own, who chase recovery and no-shows and cancellations, and who make the handoff process extensively personal because they actually care about the prospect and whether they close or not. And the other half of it is quality over quantity the whole way down, right? So a booked call that won't close is worse than an empty slot. A setter who books 30 junk calls is worth less than one who books 12 real ones. And so protect that standard over vanity metrics that don't matter whatsoever. And once the whole team actually believes that, the numbers will sort themselves out. That is how you build an SDR team that scales to 7 figures, not by dialing more or hiring faster. You'll do both, but by building pods that own their outcomes, guard their quality, and put out steady, high value pipeline week after week. Now, everything I've given you assumes you've got the right people in those seats, and that's the bit most people get badly wrong before any of this even matters, because the setter you hire and how you get them up to speed in the first month decides whether a lot of this works at all. And there's a specific thing I do in onboarding that most people would tell you is a mistake. I put new recs on live calls almost immediately within 24 to 48 hours before they're 100% ready. It costs me a few leads for sure, but it's the fastest way I've found to get someone really, really good. And so that's the next video, which is how I hire great salespeople, which is somewhere up here. And if you want this entire thing that I spoke to you about built out for your specific company, offer, etc., that is exactly what we do at SalesFly. We build SEO teams, we build a CRM, the whole sales process, etc. If you want that fully done for you, click the first link in my bio, and I will talk to you soon. Peace.